On today's episode of the Small Town Big Talk Show, I am going to share with you my biggest takeaways, my personal biggest takeaways from the RuralX conference that I just recently attended in Mitchell, South Dakota. So this is pretty cool. I don't often give SODAC a lot of additional credit because it's always a joke about which Dakota is better. Okay, but my South Dakota friends have got this figured out. There's an amazing organization called Dakota Resources. They are a nonprofit organization, and they exclusively help rural communities. They help them with economic development ideas. They do coaching and consulting for small towns, and it could be leadership development, strategic planning, just really, really smart people, and they host this great conference called RuralX. So I went down for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'm involved on several organizations in our community, but I am also trying to launch a brand new nonprofit. And I'm not revealing all of the details of it quite yet because I'm still laying a lot of groundwork for it. But was just hoping I could go down and get inspired and get some new ideas. Well, I think this is one of those situations where if you go with the intention to learn something new, chances are you're going to. If you go with the intention to meet somebody cool, chances are you're going to. And so I have a few things that I want to share. And again, these are my personal takeaways. I am not a full-time economic developer, and that was what the majority of the people there were there to do. They are dedicated to economic development. So I think that changes the way I look at information a little bit, perhaps. And so again, I'm going to share with you my biggest takeaways and also connect you to, there's 5 different people that I'm going to specifically name besides Dakota Resources. In the notes to this episode, I will link all of these sites so you can check out their good work. And if anything I shared that they've shared sparks something in you, reach out to them. I mean, that's what they're there to do. They came to share their knowledge, and some of it was just brilliant. So first of all, one of the things that I'm trying to incorporate into this space in this nonprofit that I'm starting here in my hometown is a connection to the arts. And so one of the speakers, her name was Zabel. She is from Springboard for the Arts. And she just said a number of things that I think for us in small towns, we need to keep in mind. So one of the first things she said is that art is meaning making. And I was like, oh my goodness, here's what I love about that. I think for a lot of us in small towns, we have this kind of, there's maybe a little bit of a disconnect or a disassociation from art because we think of art as fine art. Like if I do not paint, or I am not a sculptor, or I'm not a concert pianist, or, you know, like that kind of level of either talent or skill or just aptitude that I can't, I'm first of all not artistic or I don't understand art. So when she framed art as meaning making, I think it really opens our minds to what that could look like for all of us in small towns. Because the reason this is so important to me is because I really think that a connection to that ability to self-express, whether it is through like a very traditional medium like that, or it's just the idea of how do we brainstorm, how do we become more creative. Those are the things that I want to see us nurture and foster a bit more in our community, because I think it leads to innovation and it leads to progress. And so the idea of just like, how can we create more meaning? That is art. If we're making something of meaningfulness, that's art. The second thing she shared, and these are like these amazing little tidbits. Community is an activity, not a place. And again, I was like, whoa, what, like, because the whole idea, again, the nonprofit that I'm starting, community is an enormous part, an enormous component of it, which of course it is. Like community matters so much to me. And the idea that it's not like, where do you go to attain it, but what are you doing that's bringing people together to make them feel like they belong there. Because then this was something else that she said, when people feel like they don't belong, they don't contribute to the level that they could. Really think about that. So when you think about your community, are there people, like certain groups of people that don't feel like they belong? So this does absolutely start to get into kind of the diversity questions of like, are there subsets of people in your community that are maybe in the minority? Like maybe there's a population due to their culture or their ethnicity that they're just not in. Like I live in the Midwest, right? So the majority of us are like white Scandinavians, right? But that doesn't mean we don't have people with diverse either ethnicities or cultures. And is there a way that our community could do more to make them feel like they belong here? Because when people feel like they belong, they contribute at a higher level. So I thought that was beautiful. So then again, the question is, what kinds of activities could we create? What ways could we make something available so that everybody could participate it, to give them that sense of, I really do fit in here, I belong here. And then the fourth thing that she shared, so with Springboard for the Arts, they are a Minneapolis-based company, but then they have an arm of their company in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, which is not an enormous town. And she talked about the fact that some of the things that they've done in Fergus Falls has actually made their alumni, like some of the kids that have like graduated and left, it has drawn them back to their community. And she talked about the fact that homecoming, so, and this totally resonated with me because I came back to my hometown, and if any of you have heard me speak, you know that this was like a shame spiral for me initially, right? She said we need to treat homecoming as a celebration and not a failure. And I was like, oh, like I bet I was like, whoa, like Laura, sitting in the audience, because I feel so strongly about that. And that's something, again, when I think about the nonprofit that I'm trying to build and start, that how do we talk about that in a way that we encourage, and not just the people that have already left, like make it obvious to them that there are places to live and there are businesses to start and there are maybe jobs to be had and like a life, a beautiful life you could create here. Like that's absolutely part of it. But then how do we talk about our current high schoolers and say, we want you to fly, young birds. Like we want you to fly, but we want you to know that when you go out and you get your education, if that's what you do, or you go out and you get some additional life experience, if that's what you do, that if and when you ever feel like that pull or that tug to come back home, that this is a place that we will welcome you and we will celebrate you and you will live a beautiful, full, and thriving life. We don't talk like that, right? We basically are like, oh, you know, if you had to come back home, like, and I think that that's changing, but we have to change it. Like that's the story we have to tell. Like no one's going to do that for us. So Laura, those were some of the things that she shared that just really, really touched my heart and made me think about how can I incorporate some of these things into this space and nonprofit that I'm now starting. Okay, number 2, there's 5 people that I'm going to kind of highlight the best of. And again, this is just Rebecca Unum's opinion. I swear, like if you were to ask 5 other people, you would get different filters, but you're watching this talk show and this is like these are the things that really struck my heart. So number 2, his name was Tim Lampkin. He was from a organization called higherpurpose.org. There was one thing, he shared a lot of really cool things that really were applicable to me in my business, but I think maybe have a little bit less full application to just everybody. But when I think about, you know, a lot of you that watch this show, you're people in your community that are trying to get things done. You're doers. You maybe aren't necessarily like the economic development person or the chamber director, that kind of a thing, but you're like an involved, engaged human in your community, right? He made up a word. He's like, yes, this is a word. He said, I encourage you to become solutionaries. And he said, here's what that looks like in real life. We often rally people around a problem. And I was like, oh, is that not the truth, right? Like housing, let's say, like rural housing is a big, big problem. The wage or workforce development, like all of these things are problems. So we say, we've got this problem, let's rally around, and then we keep talking about the problem, right? He said solutionaries, that kind of a mindset is to say instead, we all know we have the problem. Like it really takes very little talent to be like, let's discuss the problem, because the problem's evident. Most of us can see it, right? He said instead, what if you were to say, you know, we know this is a problem. Here's a proposed solution. Now let's rally around that and build from that. So the idea of just instead of, and it's also, I've talked about this before, like nobody wants to complain and gripe by themselves, right? So it's really easy to say, gosh, this is going to hell in a handbasket and everything's crap. And then people rally around that because it feels really good to get like this negative energy. And his whole suggestion is to rally people around something that's forward looking. So this idea of being a solutionary, we're looking forward to the solution instead of focusing on the issue or the problem. And I thought that was really cool. Okay, number 3, Scott Meyer from NDSU. He actually spoke here in Oaks at the Energizing Entrepreneurs Conference, and I basically became like a fan of him then. He started at NDSU something called the NICE Center, and it really is an entrepreneurial kind of incubator for his students and integration with entrepreneurs in the community. It's just really great. So a couple of the things that he said that, again, when I think like what are good takeaways that anybody could use, everyone's there to talk about economic development. And in his mind, the key to rural economic development is entrepreneurship. And I love this because, again, it fits really beautifully with the idea that I had for my nonprofit, like what we are trying to create with this, like the mission, the point. How do you nurture that? Because big business is going to be harder to recruit to your small town for a number of reasons. You maybe won't have the workforce to support them, and you may not have housing to support them either. So while every small town wants to land their big manufacturing something or their big employer, honestly, it's a lot easier to wrap your brain around how do we maybe start 5 new businesses that are individual, independently owned, and how do we nurture people and put them in the way of the resources to help them do that. That's what I'm certainly passionate about, so super stoked that he brought that up again. Also, the second thing, a lot of you that watch this talk show are women. Women are half as likely to start businesses. And again, so like I'm not like a big old feminist or anything, but I think the question is just why? And what are we missing? What do we feel like we need? What's the hesitation? Because the other interesting statistic, and this was based on South Dakota, not North Dakota, and of course it's just state specific, but the women that have started businesses, so the women-owned businesses in South Dakota, are growing at a really rapid rate. So it's like, if they take the plunge and do it, they do it really, really well. So why aren't more of them doing it? Like, what's the holdup? What's the hang up? So it's just something to maybe ponder on. The second thing, and in my business mastermind group, we talk about this phrase all the time, and I just think it's so relevant, again, even in small towns, is the idea of the MVP of any idea. So that's minimum viable product. I struggle with this. I'm not going to lie, because like when I start to think about something, I think about like the Cadillac version, and at some point you go, well, what's the Volvo version? Like, well, how do we just like what's the minimum pieces that need to be in place, and to test the theory of it, especially if it's a completely unfounded concept, you need proof of concept, and the minimum viable product allows you to do that. So he talked all about the fact that find maybe one person that you think might want your idea or use your idea. And this could be anything. This isn't just business startup. This could be like an event or an idea that you have for some sort of engagement. Like going back to Laura with the arts, she kind of talked about this as well. Like if you want to host some giant festival in the park, what is the smallest version of that you could start with easily and invite one person or 5 people? Once one person experiences your thing, you've got customer feedback that you have a person that you can ask and say, hey, how did this work? How did this go? What would you change? Use their feedback then to see, now if I've served one person, can I serve 5 or can I serve 10? And start to ask yourself, what does that scaling look like? And that's iteration, right? You just keep changing and you keep adjusting. And you don't have to launch anything like big product or program or event wise until you feel like you've got enough data to support it, right? That's how we start. Starting small, starting with a simple version of something. There's a lot of wisdom in that for not just business owners, but just for community development in general. Okay, number 4, Becky McCrae. Becky McCrae and Deb Brown have the SaveYour.town website, and then also Becky McCrae is a smallbizsurvival.com. A couple things that she said that I really, well, I guess I wrote down one big thing that she said. She had 2. I'll add the other one even though I didn't write it down. that when it comes to the things that we put out to our communities, sometimes the fact that we are holding so tight to our own vision of what the thing needs to look like, we let the details overshadow the intention. And we lose sight of the big picture. So most of the time, like when we're trying to create an event or we're trying to create a new program or product or whatever it is in our small town, and we're like, this is so awesome. Why isn't anybody coming to it, right? If we've made it very hard for anybody else's ideas or thoughts or support to be lent to that program or product, we let the details overshadow the goal. Because the goal of all of these things is to create community. And so if you're doing everything by yourself, you're like masterminding your amazing kick-ass plan all by yourself, and you're pissed that nobody came to support it, that's when we've got to look at it, because there's a huge difference between control and passion, right? And she triggered me a little bit with this conversation, because I struggle with this. I'm not going to lie, because I really care about quality and I care about well done and well executed events. But there are sometimes things that we can completely let go of, and we just have to see that it's getting in the way of creating the thing that we were intending to create with this thing that we're trying to bring to light. I'm asking you if that makes sense. You can't answer me because we're not live, but I mean, that really makes sense, doesn't it? Because I know for me, and it's even the way I just move through the world, because I'm a perfectionist by nature. So there are so many times that I have to say, like, is this worth fighting about? Like, is this worth holding on to? What am I giving up because I'm holding so tightly to this perfect little plan I've created? If nobody gets served by it because I am not allowing any flexibility, then that's on me. That was one of my favorite things that she brought to light, because I think it's really important to remember that, especially when we're talking about anything related to the community. You've got to let other people in, and sometimes that gets messy, and sometimes it gets chaotic, and sometimes that's okay in certain pieces of it. I'm going to say straight out, I don't think you can just let go of all the rules because someone's got to drive the damn bus. Like, that's just my opinion. And again, like, maybe people would take me to task on that, but really look at it and ask, where could we be more flexible to get more people involved? Yeah, the second thing I said I would add, she had this quote, and I didn't get to hear this whole session of hers, but somebody else brought it up. She said, the dog keeps barking. The dog can keep barking, but the train keeps moving on. So the dog being all the negative people going, and the train is you and your energy and what you're trying to accomplish. You just cannot afford to be detracted by complete naysayers. And again, the one caveat I'll put on this is it depends on your role. Again, a lot of these people are economic development people, so they have stakeholders. Their stakeholders are their taxpayers. Not that you can be deterred by naysayers, but you do have to. Everyone has a voice, and you've got to hear it. When you're an entrepreneur, you get a little more creative flexibility, a little more creative freedom, and I love that. You get a little more license. If I'm not taking your money to make my thing work, I don't really have to care what you say. So there is something to be said about strength of conviction with some of the ideas that we bring forward. So I thought that was worth mentioning too. Okay, number 5. This guy was so rad, and he was so different, like, from all the other presenters. His name is Tane Danger, and he is an improv guy, which, man, it sparked a lot of thoughts in my brain about, like, how do we bring more of this to my small town? He has a I don't know if it's a web-based show. I'm gonna have to look him up, like, more thoroughly, but it's called The Theater of Public Policy. And basically him and his improv friends bring an expert on into their show, and they talk to them about something very serious, and then the improv group, like, makes it funny and lighthearted, which is just a really beautiful thing. And he talked all about how do we nurture a sense of humor and nurture creativity while discussing these really difficult, challenging things that can be super vexing, and everybody gets angry and it's kind of tense. So one of the biggest things in improv, and I actually learned this back when I was training to become a Dale Carnegie facilitator, is the value of the improv notion of yes and. And I hadn't heard it in a while, and it's amazing how, like, you've heard things and actually learned them, but then maybe don't use it. And so there again, these are muscles, and he really was. He's like, there are not have and have-nots of, like, funny and not funny people, creative and not creative people. They are just muscles. And so how do you put yourself in the way of opportunities to flex those muscles more? So it's clear that I have not been flexing my improv muscle of yes and, because I kind of forgot about it until he made us do it. So what that sounds like is that somebody states an idea in a committee meeting, and instead of going, well, okay, but, which is what probably more of us do, because the Midwest, we're just fraught with like the passive aggressive, like we don't want to be mean and just shoot you down directly. So we'll smile and say, oh, like in their mind, it's like cute idea, but here's all the problems. Really looking at them, saying yes. First of all, you're saying yes. Like it's almost like, yes, thank you for sharing your idea. And instead of saying, but here's all the ways we're going to shoot it down, you say, and. Like, yes, like that could work. And then you add to it. And the whole thing is that what this is, it's a creative brainstorming way to approach real problems, where nobody's ideas get shut down. Because here's the thing, he said he's obviously worked in this field enough to know. He's worked in a lot of nonprofits. He said, is it just the killing of that one idea? So like I bring an idea up and somebody says, no, Rebecca, that's stupid. Is it just my idea that's killed? No, it's every idea that everybody around the room also may have had and is now too afraid to say out loud. Really think about that. It like could make me cry thinking about how quickly a dismissive, like slam your fist down or just look at somebody and dismissively, condescendingly say like that's not going to work, how it just kills ideas. Yes, and even it's not, the yes isn't like yes, let's do it. It's yes, thank you for saying that out loud, and maybe it could work. And what if we added this? And what if we tried this? And right, so his whole thing is yes and puts us all in the mindset of what you and I can create, co-create together is always more powerful than what either of us could create on our own. And I think inherently we all know that, but when it comes to these really challenging conversations, I mean, it's something, I mean, it was a good reminder for me because I like to think of myself as really good and open-minded. But when I'm working with people that are fairly close-minded, I'm close-minded to them. I bring that energy. So that's a reminder for me to just say, am I really open-minded, or am I only open-minded to people that are open-minded? And that is a whole different set of challenges for me, right? Like, because I'm not any better if I go into a situation like that and I'm mad because they're closed off, so I close them off. I'm not helping the situation at all. So how do we embrace the yes and? It creates positive energy and it creates momentum for brainstorming. So those were my the five people that I felt from a speaker standpoint impacted me the most. Two just little simple things that I noticed throughout the day and a half, 2 days that I was there. One is that most of our communities face the same challenges. That we truly are not alone, and the more that we can come together, whether it's at a conference like that where you're very clearly coming together, or you can call your neighboring community and make some connections with people and just say like, how are you guys approaching this? Working together, like we are all facing the same sets of challenges over and over and over. And it didn't matter. I was there. I feel like Oaks was maybe kind of we're still small, very small town, but like a mid-ish sized town. Like there was a lot of 1,200, 1,400, and then there was 7,500 in terms of population. And we were in a community of about 15,000. There was a couple, that size. But it doesn't matter. Like problems are problems because people are people. It's just the scale and the way that it presents itself, right? So get together with people, collaborate, try to come up with ideas together, help each other. And then the second thing that became really clear is that in small towns, we aren't good at telling our own stories. And so where this really resonated for me was thinking about the celebration of people returning home, and the being pride of the buildings that are for sale and the businesses that might be for sale and the opportunities that exist here, being proud of that. I think there was a little bit there's sometimes that hesitation to share it because it makes it look like we're dying, like, oh, we have empty buildings. Well, yeah, no crap, everybody can see them. So why hide them? Why not say, hey, let's talk about what if Oaks, and then just fill in the blank. What if in this building, fill in the blank, and start to bring people in and start those dialogues. Like, we're just not good at highlighting those things. We want to almost hide, or we're embarrassed by it, so we hide. Well, that's not going to help anything. Honestly, that's the whole thing with shame, period, is that if you keep it in the dark, it remains shameful. Bring it into the light and it's not so scary anymore. So I hope that you found this valuable, and I hope that you reach out, you find the links in the notes to this episode, and you look at some of the things that particularly these 5 people are doing, and Dakota Resources, because it really is incredible to see the things that other communities, even far away, are, what they're doing. Tim, I think, was in Missouri or Mississippi. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but the idea that he's doing something that absolutely could be replicated. And we don't have to reinvent the wheels, guys. Like, we just have to look at what's being done and saying, how could this work? What could this look like in my small town? So I would love to hear from you on this. If there are certain things that I mentioned that really struck me, that struck you, let's talk about that. If you have other resources to share, please, please, please reach out. Let me know what the best of the best is that you're coming across. Because like I said, we are all in this together, and the more we can support each other, the better we're all going to be. Okay? Have a great day, guys.